Hopefully it.
With MailChimp, you can design more engaging marketing assets in no time at all, thanks to our AI-powered.
I think we lost our host with the most, but
I think you made Harley the host. There you
Technology for you. Oh, he's back.
Hey, Harley, thanks for joining us tonight. There he is.
Wow, I don't know what happened. I think I hit the wrong button. I'm like,
Oh.
where did everybody go? We're live.
You did like a Robert. Robert did that on his show when it started opening up and everything, and all of a sudden, whoops, he was gone, and then.
That is crazy. Let's not ever do that one again. All right. So now we're good now. Okay, good. Hello everyone and welcome to ClearPropTV and PPG Grandpa's Paramotor Podcast. ClearPropTV.com is what you see right now. Come here every Monday night to watch us live. If you want to listen to us because you don't want to see our ugly mugs, go to paratalk.org and listen to our audio. We have Harley here. He is our guest tonight, and you probably remember him from our show back in episode 24. This is season 3, episode 110, and we got a great show for you tonight. We have Paramotor USA, our Linda Anderson, our cheerleader. She's a little bit under the weather, so she's on mute, I guess, but glad that you're here. We also have Will Fly from willflyppg.com. Glad you're here, buddy. He does a lot of great videos. If you haven't been over there, make sure you go to willflyppg.com. Hit that subscribe and that bell notification. Amazing stuff. We also got Eric and Jade Lear. You can find them over at ppglear.com, L-E-A-R, and paramotorgirl.com. They do some paramotor shows on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. We'll talk about that later tonight. But tonight is not about us. Tonight is about Harley. You probably known him from the 50X challenge. He did the coast to coast. We're going to have an amazing show tonight. Harley, Milne, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. It's been a little while, so I'm kind of glad to be here.
It's been a while. So for those of you out there that don't know Harley, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into paramotoring.
Sure. So, goodness, I first, watched, I guess they were called, goodness, what were they called? They're basically like a hang glider with a motor on the bottom. I think, I can't even remember what those were called, but when I was in high school, I got to see those guys. And then when my grandfather died, he left me, I don't know, equivalent of about 5,000 Rand, which in today's terms couldn't have been more than about $500. But I learned to fly one of those, and it was just prohibitively expensive. So probably about 7 years ago, I was in Asia and read this magazine about paramotoring, and I was like, I got to do it. And 6 months later, I was out flying, learning to fly anyway. And that's what got me into paramotoring.
Well, you gave us a clip, about a 3-minute clip here. Tell us about what are we looking at right now?
Yeah, so what I did for your show here is put out this new premiere of just some of the cool places that I've got to fly sort of over the last, I don't know, 6 months or so. And in fact, the first half of this video, about a minute and a half, were all just in the last month where I started out. And I guess this is going backwards from the trips. So Arizona Circus, then Pinal, where they store the airplanes. This is the Sacatan Mine. And it's really deep. I went all the way down 700 feet into this hole. It's absolutely huge, but got me to go all the way into the bottom. And then prior to that was Glamis Dunes here. One of my favorite places to go, actually, because it's so pretty and it's always changes. And of course, there's lots of other sports there. And the trip sort of started off here with the Salton Sea. So this is me unboxing the new Da Vinci Disco. And this is sort of becoming a replacement for my Snake 1.2. And I'm absolutely loving this wing so far. So that's kind of what this first half of the video is. And the second half is really about some of all the other super, super cool places that I probably flew over the previous, I don't know, 8 months or so.
You've been to a lot of different fly-ins, right? So what kind of fly-ins? I see that you've been to Salton Sea, but what other fly-ins have you been to?
Yeah, so not as many East Coast ones as I would love to do. But goodness, I got to remember the one in Florida. What's it? Sun and Fun, I think was the one of the main ones down at the goodness, right on the edge. You know, John Ripper would remember what it was called, but on the East Coast, that one, and I guess also out in Georgia, couple out there. But here on the West Coast, yeah, typically it's Blackhawk, Lincoln, Salton are the main ones that I go to here on the West Coast. We're not as lucky as you guys on the East Coast, where you've got so many more fly-ins.
Now, I say that you're flying an airplane. You said that you got your GA finally.
Yeah, so this is one of those things, you know, growing up in South Africa, everything's so expensive and you just never think you're ever going to try and do one of these things. But, you know, one of the things I discovered through the 50-state tour was like really the airports out there are just great. And so when it shows how general aviation, you can really go from place to place all the time, and such an amazing experience. So I kind of, during the 50-state tour, said I absolutely wanted to go ahead and do it. And so I spent the first quarter of last year and went and did it. And actually, I'm going to be doing about 8 hours of night flying this week, just building my hours. And I don't know, might eventually do a commercial or something crazy.
Now, how many hours do you think that you actually have of flying? I know we talked about this on the pre-show.
Yeah, so paramotoring, I'm at about 1,000 hours, and I'm averaging, I don't know, about 200 to 250 a year paramotoring. Last year in general aviation, I did about 100. So altogether, about 250 to 300 hours last year, which was too much, I think.
That's a lot. You sound like you fly like me. Every time that you get the chance, you're out there flying. I think that we even have some questions in the chat, but before we ask the question in the chat, let's say hello to the people that have joined us. John Wayne, London, Ivy, Bill H, Deweese, Milstead, Eric PPG, Lear, let's see, Austin, let's see, who else? PPG, the other Nick, Daniel Rouge, Kirk K. We got a lot of people here, and thank you so much for joining us. James, I'm scrolling down. We got Paramotor Girl, Nick Griffith, Mad Sloper, Travis DuPoint. We got a lot of people in here, so thank you so much for joining us tonight. We also got a question in the chat, and Eric is going to ask that one.
Yeah, so this is from Daniel Roush. How did you like the Flow RPM wing?
I absolutely love it, actually. It's probably one of the fastest cross-country wings that I've ever flown. You know, when I researched doing the coast to coast, I kind of boiled it down to just 2 gliders that I knew I could trust and that I wanted to utilize, and that really was the Hadron 3 and the Speedster 3. And I landed up going with the Hadron 3. And I think that was great. You know, it turned out to be a good decision. I probably could have gone down to about a 20 on the Hadron 3. But with London Ivy, I'm so glad to see him on at Cloudbase PPG. I finally spelt his name correctly, actually put the E in there. So I haven't got a lot of time on the RPM, but it's incredibly fast. To give you some idea, when I took it down to the Salton Sea, with no wind at all, I'm averaging about 45 miles an hour. And with just a little bit of wind, I'm cranking out 50, 53 miles an hour. And, you know, you put a good solid tailwind behind you. And, if you put a 50, 60 mile an hour tailwind behind you, you're doing over 100. So you're covering real distance. I mean, you're actually flying faster than a car. And so one of the benefits I think I found with that glider was it comes up a little bit slower. It's actually a little weird for me to go back where you know, a lot of the A gliders will come up much slower, and then sort of you speed up, and you know the glider comes forward. I found I was coming off the A's just a little quickly, and that's because I'm used to much more sporty gliders. So if you're in a high wind scenario, that actually for me can be a benefit, because with a sporty glider it just rips up too quickly, and I'm a little slow on my feet sometimes. So it's a great glider. I'm loving it, and I'm looking forward to doing some more cross country time on it, because you know, the other thing too is it's kind of maneuverable, which you know you don't always get from some of the safer cross country gliders. So if you compare it to the Luna 2, which I love, to try and get that thing to turn, you really need to use the tip steering. The RPM, it's sporty, but it's really fast and safe so far. Is what I'm liking about it.
Now, when it comes to takeoffs and landings with those fast wings, do you notice it, or do they take off and land like the Luna?
I actually, that's kind of what I really liked about the RPM was, you know, it's a really easy takeoff and landing. It's not very sporty at all. It's a lot like the Luna 2. So, you know, that's, you know, I get a little bit more speed out of that RPM than you can get out of the Luna 2. So I like that, but then the takeoff and landings it's very, very similar. You know, I wouldn't say there's a huge amount of difference. I think the toggle setup and sort of the rises and sort of, you know, whether you've got your tip steering tied in and so forth, those are a little changes that you kind of have to get used to when you switch those gliders.
What machines have you flown as far as paramotors themselves, as far as the frames and the motors?
Yeah, I goodness. Of course, I started off with Blackhawk, and I'm still mostly flying Blackhawk. But flown Parajet, I think Power to Fly. I flew an old Walker jet down in Hawaii. That was an experience. I think maybe a Simonini engine, actually, pretty old one.
I bet that was pretty heavy.
It was heavy. It sat low. It wasn't very comfortable. It was an older unit. Died of me once in the air, had an emergency landing. Flew the flat top, actually. You know, I should have, while I talked to Trevor when I was down at Sultan, I should have asked him to let me fly it again, because I think if I get that flat top adjusted, I'll like it even more in the air than I already did. So it's, you know, a lot of people sort of, I think when you start out, you definitely are wanting a much lighter machine and something that's a little bit stronger and so forth, so that when you mess up, you can work around it. But I think these days, I will pretty much fly anything that somebody will let me try. I was very curious to see a couple of the new manufacturers' machines at Sultan and at Arizona Circus, and unfortunately, I didn't get to fly any of those machines, but I don't know, probably 5 or 6 different frames in total, and everything from, I guess, the old HE, Vitarazi, Corsair, of course. You know, they supported me through the coast to coast, but I really am loving that engine for a number of reasons. The big thing that I like about it is it's a little bit quieter than the alternatives. So if you've got a frame that doesn't reverberate a lot, and you've got a quiet engine, it's amazing how much closer you can get to livestock without them freaking out. It doesn't upset the neighbors quite as much. And so I personally like something that's a little quieter. The other big thing for me with the Corsair engines is that they are, certainly with the Black Devil in particular, it's about 15 to 20% more fuel efficient than anything else that I've flown. So, you know, with the Moster, you're flying a 185, you're flying a 172 Corsair. They both produce about the same amount of power, and there's about a 1.5 pound difference in weight between the two of them. So smaller, slightly smaller piston, but you're creating the same amount of horsepower. You're getting more fuel efficiency, about 1.1 gallons versus 1.5 gallons on the Vitarazi. And the other big thing for me is the Vitarazi, you pretty much, there's required maintenance or recommended maintenance every 50 hours. It's about half as much maintenance on the Corsair that I've had. And things like the exhaust bushings and all that kind of thing, you don't get as much wear. And literally all I've had to do is put in a carb kit and clean the top of the piston on the last 120, 130 hours on my Corsair. And I like the engine. I'm very, very happy with it. And, Corsair have been making that design probably longer than anybody else. So it's a solid engine. Other thing too, on warranties, you can go direct. You can call Corsair directly, even if you buy it from a distributor here, and you can get your warranty support straight away without filing a lot of paperwork. And I love my Vitarazi engine. It's a great engine, but when it comes down to warranties, Corsair have just been absolutely stellar.
Interesting that you're talking about the Corsair 172, because that one is on the way for me for my next motor. So I'm anxious to fly that. Any other questions in the chat, Eric?
Yeah.
Or Will?
It's okay. Bill H, and I think I know the answer to this question, but he's asking, since you're flying general aviation, do you plan to stop flying paramotors?
Absolutely not. For one thing, I can do a hell of a lot more flying in paramotoring at a fraction of the cost. It's so expensive just to keep flying the stuff, and it's I want to fly more. I want to do more trips. It's a constant balance between trying to stay solvent and figuring out the next trip to do.
Right.
Absolutely.
On. There's a as a pilot myself, I mean, I'd be curious to hear what your takeaway is. Like, what do you love about general aviation as opposed to, I mean, what do you get from one that you don't get from the other? That I like a comparison.
I mean, definitely being able to cover more distance in a little bit more comfort is kind of cool. I'm definitely down for doing, $100 hamburger in general aviation just as much as I am for, a $50 hamburger in paramotoring, right? If I could figure out a way, and I keep saying I don't want to sell my soul and go work for a regular company and start making some real money again. But if I could go out and buy an airplane where I can literally fly, parafly, camp, whole bang, I think I would live like a gypsy, and that's how I would make it work so that I could do both together and go all over the place.
I wonder how many people out there would like to do that. If you're in the chat, let us know. Would you like to just fly paramotors and live off the land so you have more time to go out there and fly? Let us know. I know I would if I could just, be a minimalist. I don't know. I don't think I can, but I would love to.
Well, I mean, you see them already doing it, right? I moved into this camper 2 years ago, and I'm very fortunate. I'm on a winery where I'm keeping an eye on the property here, and so my cost of living is relatively low, and that's how I'm affording to do these things, especially since my business is barely going. The COVID almost destroyed it, and having a startup sucks. It's hard work.
Yeah,
absolutely. Bill H in the chat just said yes, he would. So yeah.
For those of you who don't know, $100 hamburger is what they call it when you rent an airplane or whatever, or you just fly your own airplane over to another airport or whatever and grab a burger and fly back. But it's not $100 anymore.
Yeah, it's more like a $200 hamburger now. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky. I fly through the Travis Air Force Base Aero Club. And so, if you want to learn how to fly in the Bay Area, you can pay anything from $80 to $125 an hour just for an instructor. And then for a plane, you're typically looking closer to about $120 dry plus fuel. And fuel here in California is the most expensive, probably, maybe not quite the world, but certainly in the whole United States. We're paying $5.50 now for unleaded 100, so it's crazy expensive. So the Aero Club's a lot cheaper. I'm paying about $80 to $85 an hour for an airplane, plus the $50-$60 an hour for fuel. So per gallon for fuel, I should say.
So paramotoring is the cheapest form of powered aviation that we know of right now.
I think so. I mean, I don't know if electric's any cheaper, and I guess if you want to ride your bicycle to charge your paramotor.
I didn't even think about that. You could have
one way to do it.
Like a bike or something, at your house, or a treadmill that generates electricity. I guess you could fly for free. I don't know. We'll have to figure that one out. Probably
you could fly drive, basically cycle until you get the paramotor charged, and then take off and then land again and pedal some more. I mean, we're going back to the Wright brothers days.
That's pretty awesome. Now I know that before the show, when we were at the pre-show, we talked about a couple things that we want to talk about. So tonight we're going to be talking about safety, and we're going to be talking about flying out of airports. We're also going to be talking about ADS-B that's portable for paramotors, and the differences between getting a ADS-B for drones and putting them on the paramotor, and a real ADS-B that's portable. And Harley's going to be talking about that. And we're also going to be talking about your 50X coast to coast. So let's go ahead and start off the bat with safety and paramotoring. What do you want to talk about as far as the safety in paramotoring?
I think, last year was a little disconcerting at the beginning of the year when we started, because we had a number of fatalities. And I don't ever remember a year in paramotoring, let alone in general aviation, when there were so many fatalities. I think general aviation averaged about 1 fatality per day. And as I recall, I think we had about 9 or 10 paramotor related fatalities last year. So that was quite a lot. I think we had a rash of them at the beginning of the year, and a rash of them sort of towards the end of the year. And, one of the things I appreciated about both the Salton Sea and Arizona Flying Circus this year was, people attending these flyings really did seem to put safety at a much higher level than they had done in previous years. And so my encouragement is that we continue to do that. Unfortunately at Glamis, we had 2 incidents in the space of 12 hours where one inexperienced pilot with a matter of maybe 10 or so flights under their belt pulled a very sharp maneuver, and unfortunately landed up going into a steep dive into the ground, and had to be ambulanced out of there with several broken bones. But less than 12 hours later, one of the most experienced pilots that we have here in the United States also experienced an incident, and he had to be helicoptered out of the dunes, mostly because of where he was, but also, pretty severe injuries. So I think it's really just one of those examples where it doesn't seem to matter how much experience you have on one end or how little experience you have on the other. Constantly being aware of what's going on, and thinking about your own safety is critical. If you're low to the ground, there's always that opportunity, as was the case here, where the Glamis Dunes gremlins, they reached out and grabbed Predator and said, come hang out down here for a little while. You're having too much fun up there. So I just want to encourage people to continue to be safe, and if you're going to do maneuvers, do them high and practice them where you're not getting a lot of eyes who are worried for your safety or raising eyebrows. Do it in a way that's safe, and continue to look after yourself out there. I'm hoping we don't really see any major incidents like we saw last year.
I agree. And here's something too, for everybody here on the panel, and of course you guys that are listening to us that have access to that super chat. live here, how many people actually fly with a reserve, and how many people don't fly with a reserve because they choose not to? And one of the things that I'm sure that you guys have seen, you've seen that one paraglider that was flying along, minding his own business, no one else was around, and a big bird got caught in his lines and took him down. If he wasn't able to throw a reserve, I don't know what would have happened. So, you know, it's not that I fly really well, but what if something happens? Do you have a reserve to fall back on? So who flies with a reserve? I know I do. Anybody else? Harley does. Eric?
Yeah, I admit I'm sometimes, you know, I'm in a hurry, or I'm just going to do a quick low flight where I know I'm flying low to the ground, and I don't really want to hassle with a reserve. But, you know, one of the things, you know, through the 50-state tour, I didn't have one, and I had never flown in anything where I felt like I needed one. And then I knew as I was going to do the coast to coast, you know, it was paramount that I had one. And then right before the coast to coast, in the middle of summer, I had an incident where I came through this massive big thermal. The whole one side of the glider collapsed, and it took 1,000 feet to recover. And I didn't have 1,000 feet left, and I didn't have a reserve that day. And if I'd had one, I would have definitely thrown it. So it took a little while to clean my shorts afterwards, but that was an example where, you know, having one is critical. And the interesting thing is, you know, I know that I'm flying, you know, more aggressively now. I'm flying at more times of the day when the risks are greater. And I have actually found that I've noticed I get a little more nervous when I don't have the reserve. So I don't think we want to get into a scenario where you're doing things because you feel like you've got the safety of the reserve, but it sure as heck makes perfect sense to have it, even if you had to throw it out at 200 feet. Anything to help cushion that landing is going to be important.
Absolutely. I'm with you. If I'm going to be up high, if I'm going to be going someplace, I'll fly with the reserve. If I'm just going to be doing some foot dragging, I probably won't. Let's see. Daniel Roosh said, had one mounted before my first flight. Eric said, yes, I fly with the reserve. John Wayne, I fly with the reserve. Travis DuPont says the same thing. I just messed up everything. My thing just went. So seems like a lot of people do fly with reserves, which is a good thing. I think that there's another question in the chat. Who's going to ask that question?
Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, I do have one question kind of going back, and then I'll get to this question, kind of going back to the reserves. Some people buy them and they actually mount them in their car. How high do you have to be for that to work when it's still in the back seat of your car? Okay, now to the question. And this is from Bill H. What's the next fly-in that you are looking to attend?
Actually, I think there's another one that I haven't been to here in Northern California, somewhere in March. Might have to go look at my calendar. That I think I am going to try and go to that one. I guess it's Oroville Airport fly-in. It's actually a general aviation guest fly-in, but what's cool there is they actually have camping. So for paramotorists that are in Northern California, this is one of those airports where you can literally go fly camp. This time of year, you know, we're sort of getting to the end of the good flying season here, but it's far enough north. There's loads of agriculture rather than livestock, and so I kind of like it up there because you're very, you know, a lot less likely to piss a farmer off because, you know, cattle aren't always comfortable around paramotors.
Apparently I said Travis's name wrong. It should be DuPont, right? Is that it? DuPont and not DuPont? My bad. All right. Let's see. So we were talking about the safety. Anything else that we want to talk about as far as safety? Because the next thing we want to talk about is flying out of airports.
All right. Well, as everyone knows, I'm a huge proponent of paramotors flying at airports. That's what airports are for. A lot of smaller municipal airports aren't particularly well used. And so the quieter the airport, if it's there and it's within a close enough distance of where you live, I encourage people to use it. I think one of the things that I most often hear paramotor pilots say is, oh, is the airport paramotor friendly? And my opinion, for what little it may be worth, is that you're asking the wrong question. When you ask that question, what you're kind of demonstrating is that you don't really understand airspace and why the FAA actually funds these airports, and that they are there for you to fly out of. And so really the question should not be, is it, paramotor friendly? It's really, does the airport have specific SOPs, standard operating procedures, for how ultralights operate at that particular airport? And it shouldn't matter whether it's a paramotor or anything else that falls under the ultralight class, or even the sport license class. So I really should put out a video that sort of cover this, but what I do when I want to go fly out of an airport is typically I go talk to other regular pilots there and I find out what's going on. I don't even mention that I'm an ultralight pilot. I might not even say I'm a pilot, but I'm saying, hey, I'm thinking of, coming to this airport and flying out of here. And can you tell me what the activities are and how busy things are? And and you usually find the old guys are useful. They want to tell you how things work there. And very quickly you learn about what's really going on there, versus if you just go to some airport manager and who may not even be from aviation. He might be appointed by the city now and he's a retired fire or police officer, who don't really know very much about aviation. And you say, hey, I want to come fly here. And you say, I've got this glider thing and a big motor attached to my back. They kind of get nervous because they don't really know, and you don't sound like you know what you're doing. So generally speaking, coming in and knowing what you're asking to begin with, find out what the politics are, even go to one of their safety meetings. A lot of these airports have a club there, and just listen to the safety meeting and what their concerns are and how things are going. And then eventually you're forearmed in a way that you can ask the most appropriate questions. So if you're trying to go fly at an airport and you want some information before, feel free to reach out to me. The method I've been using seems to work. I probably fly out of at least 30 different airports here in the Bay Area. It's typically a lot of busy airspace too, because it's very congested and you can't throw a stone without hitting an airport here in the Bay Area, and some of it's quite busy. But if you understand airspace and you sort of make friends with the local pilots that are there and find out how things are really working, then your question can be, hey, I plan to fly my ultralight here. Do you have a standard operating procedure, or do you have an area where you would prefer us to launch and take off from, and follow the procedures? And if you go to AirNav, you can look up everything you need to know about an airport, find out whether it's public. If it's public, then typically it's supported by the FAA, which means you can fly there. If it's uncontrolled, in other words, it's a G or an E airport, you're going to be fine flying out of there. If they have procedures for helicopters, those can often be useful in terms of following the same procedures for coming in and out, because typically helicopters are going to come in nice and slow. And then if you're flying with a bunch of other guys, one of the things we've done here in the Bay Area is we've got about 100 guys now in our local group, and we're all subscribed to a channel, and we have documented ourselves all of the operating procedures for all of the airports that we go fly out of, and we all follow those pretty religiously to protect our airports. And so, when there is a problem, it's usually someone who's not part of our group, and then we try and bring them in so we can educate them. And as a result, generally speaking, we don't have problems with airports unless they're trying to change things on us. And usually if they're trying to do that, they understand fairly quickly that, we're a pretty large group now, pretty well educated, and I'm on a first name basis with my local FAA standards office. So I call them up when I have questions, or if we have a problem somewhere, and say, like, are what we're saying correct, and how should we handle this? And I flew the Concorde Weapons Station a few years ago, and we had an incident there where they tried to tell us we couldn't fly there. And the flight standard office said, no, this airspace per the charts is correct. And that got escalated all the way to the Pentagon, and they were told to back off and leave us alone. So if you are forewarned, foreeducated, you can often go fly at these airports and do it responsibly, and actually take the time to educate other forms of aviation that you do know what you're doing. In other words, you've had some training, you understand about airspace, and you follow operating procedures and understand how a pattern works. And that way you're not flying out of somebody's backyard or a park or near other things that people don't really want you there, because you have legitimacy flying out of an airport.
I love flying out of my airport. And I think you're right. When you go to an airport, don't tell them that you fly a paramotor, just say ultralight. And that's like a blanket, umbrella covering of everything that is under the FAR 103. And most people understand ultralight. They don't understand this, what's this PPG thing you're talking about?
Yeah, what's this PPG thing, or paramotor? And in many cases, if you just say you're a pilot and you behave like a pilot and sound like a pilot, then they might be curious and well, what do you fly? Well, I happen to fly this ultralight.
I agree. Yeah, we're really lucky over here at our airport. It's not a controlled airport, and the airport manager gave us an actual code to go into the gate, where to go. There's a huge field that's just for us, and I think we got really lucky. But I think it also is how you conduct yourself as a person and who you talk to. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a slam dunk across the whole of the United States. There are some states on the East Coast where they are trying to force ultralights to have insurance, just like they're required for general aviation, and that's a little bit problematic. And typically, either you try and find a way to do it or to comply, or you've got to have that tough conversation, and you've got to pick your battles and make sure that you're properly informed. And there are ways to go about doing that. Obviously, we don't have time in this show to talk about it, but the better informed you are, and obviously you want to go down the approach where you're easily getting the cooperation that you're looking for, where they're embracing you versus they're basically trying to stop the activity. There's only one airport that I have been to where the airport manager said, under no circumstances am I going to let paramotors here. And, she didn't have anything in her remarks specifically that didn't allow ultralights. And that has to be approved by the FAA too, if they're FAA funded. I have two private airports right next to me, the closest airports I have, but they're private and both of them don't allow ultralights. And I have tried. So those are games that you can't win. But if they're FAA funded, 9 times out of 10, you got to decide how badly you want it, whether you want to go fight those battles. And I try to go down the approach of really, educating or at least sharing and sort of giving them the opportunity to play along versus having to call my flight standards office and get them to call them to find out what's going on. And that's a call they don't really want, because then they have to start explaining things to the FAA, and that can trigger an inspection. And there isn't an airport I can think of that wants an inspection.
No, it doesn't sound like anybody wants. I don't want an inspection. I don't want anybody coming over here and inspecting my house. Or I understand. Hey, any questions in the chat? Any questions on the panel so far for Harley?
Yeah, you've got a question from some guy named ppglear.com, and thank you, Eric, for making it my turn. He's asking about what do you think, Harley, about how the sport's exploding in popularity, and what about all the females that are coming into the sport?
Um,
Hmm.
I think it's amazing that we have so many more women coming into the sport. And, you know, the women coming into the sport, it's not like skydiving where they're just sitting on the sidelines and, you know, ready to kiss the guy when he lands on the ground. The more women I see coming into the sport and actually getting involved in learning to fly. And it doesn't seem to matter whether they're 4'8" or 5 feet. They put their motor on and off they go. You know, Alexis Quintana, I mean, she's barely 5 feet and she's killing it out there, right? So you know, I think the more the better in my mind, because I think that's what's tough. If you can start to get couples in to fly and so forth, I think the sport's going to get better. In terms of its popularity, I mean, it's amazing just how much of it it's exploded. I remember when, you know, I was flying here in the Bay Area, and maybe there were only between 1 and 5 other active pilots, and now we've got, you know, 40, 50 active pilots that fly quite routinely. Certainly no less than 20 or 30 that fly a lot. So I think that's huge. I think, you know, I think predominantly I like the fact that I see people having more training. I just watched a video today where Judson Graham and Trevor Steele sat down and I had a discussion, and, you know, even Trevor Steele's modifying, you know, the Dell program to have more ground related material that isn't just, you know, kiting and so forth. So I think overall we're doing a very good job in making sure that we don't have additional legislation come in, because the training overall is getting good. And I think especially for newer pilots, I mean, I would like to say we have a fairly decent safety record, and that training overall from good schools which have multiple instructors and a good documented program that they follow is critical. Look, we're seeing a lot of new guys coming in and training, and I think of guys like PPG Gorilla, who's just killing it out there. There's certainly a lot of room for individual training, but hopefully they get big enough where they can expand those schools and you get the benefit of multiple instructors all sharing this different information rather than just learning from one person only one way. And, you know, I think a lot of people learn and then they start teaching, and I think that's great. But I'd also encourage people, if you're planning on teaching, probably go work an intern at a school. I mean, with USPPA, you're supposed to do an internship and actually co-teach with an instructor and eventually build those credentials. So I think overall there's more to be done. I think it's going to be very interesting to see with the change in the guard for USPPA, how much more we can do to try and get more instructors properly certified and training. And those that don't necessarily want to go through their program, I think so long as that they've got good resources, I think we'll see the sport continue to grow and hopefully safely. And I'd like to see the number of incidents that go down of people getting hurt. I still think they're probably a little higher. And, you know, I'm one of those poster childs, right? I broke an ankle on my very first landing. And I got hurt a second time 6 months later, and I got hurt a third time 3 years later. So, you know, I've got hurt. I know what it takes, you know, how situationally it could all be just the pilot and not the instruction. But on the flip side of that, perhaps if I'd gone through a different school, or perhaps if I had taken off with the instructor who was actually instructing me at the time instead of a second instructor, maybe that would have made a difference. I don't know, but the reality is I think the schools that are set up like a real school and they have a good curriculum and lots of people on board to help teach those individuals, I think those pilots overall tend to be better prepared than what I might have seen at some other schools where it's literally just the one-on-one guy. And it's not to say that doesn't work, because I've seen that work quite well as well.
Yeah, the more people, the better. I understand.
I mean, what I didn't know before the 50 state tour was, I had learned one way and I had even started to teach that way. And I very quickly realized that, oh, I really didn't know as much as I thought I knew. And there are so many other ways to go do it. If you haven't tried, if you're starting to teach somebody else and you came out of one school and you haven't gone and watched training at these other schools, I would encourage somebody to go do that before you start teaching, because there's always a new trick to go learn and maybe do a better job than what you already know.
Absolutely. Any other questions in the chat, guys?
Yeah, there is. Let's see. There's a Kevin Voigt here. He said, I am Harley's neighbor in Napa, and we met at Salton Sea this year. I am doing my training this week, starting Friday at Salton with Team Fly Halo. Can't wait to fly with Harley at some point. So did you have any influence on this guy?
I don't know that I had any influence, but we had a conversation a few weeks ago. So it's exciting that he's going to go down to Salton and get his first set of flights in there. And then the challenge, of course, of coming back to Napa is there's lots of grapes and there's lots of steel hanging out the ground and lots of trees. So we'll get him set up where he can gradually build his experience. And the great thing is we have this amazing community, between Petaluma and all the way down to San Jose. There's just so many of us and so many different places to go fly. So I know he's going to have a blast.
Yeah, and congratulations, Kevin, on taking your training, and
Absolutely.
tell us how your good flight or your first flight is.
Yeah, you'll have to definitely come back and let us know. Real quick, before I forget to ask this question, everybody in the chat, who knew Harley before tonight? Just let us know if you knew Harley before tonight, or is this the first time you heard of Harley? And just let us know that this is your first time by saying nice to meet you. All right, go ahead, Eric. Thank you.
All right, come on. Who has not heard of Harley that is in the paramotor community?
That's what I was telling Harley. Everybody knows Harley. You've done so much. You are definitely known.
I was a little surprised when I got down to Salton and a couple people recognized me. I always joke and say, like, how many of you have managed to forget my name yet? But yeah, no, it was one of the cool things about the trip. I really did. I got to meet so many people I hadn't met before, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, that's I would almost go so far as to say is my paramotor family is much bigger and even kinder than the rest of my life. So I'm very grateful to the paramotor community.
I think fly-ins are to finally meet everyone that we've been watching and hearing on the internet, all the YouTube videos and Facebook and posts and stuff. It's like, I finally get to meet you in real life. And they're usually pretty darn awesome people.
Yeah, I find that I've started to do even less flying at fly-ins now because I'm spending more time talking to people. So
and it's more fun talking.
Yeah.
You can fly at home.
I know, right? Fly at home. Who needs to fly at a fly-in? We need more of a talk-in than a fly-in.
It's shut in.
There we go. Shut it. There we go. That's what I was thinking about.
One thing I wanted to say also, like Harley, you touched on, we were talking about how exploding the sport is. And there's whole families that are doing it. Travis DuPoint said he's got 2 female pilots in his household and him. So, and not too long ago, it was a family of 5, and it was going to become a family sport. So, right. I mean, that's just totally awesome.
I'm trying to remember the family out in I want to say it's in Wisconsin. It's like Western Wisconsin. A huge family. I think there's like 8 boys in there, and everybody flies. I think it's the Martin family, and I don't remember the school that they have, but it's so amazing to go there. And they're a huge family of, I don't know, 15 or so. And more than half the family actually flies. It's absolutely incredible.
It is. That is the Martin family?
Yeah.
and it's the dad and 4 sons, and it's high five paramotor. I
High
do believe.
paramotoring. There you go. Yeah, I got to fly with them one time when I was out there, and it was the first time I'd had a home cooked meal in, I don't know, several months while I was on the road. So they were absolutely amazing, and I think I actually saw them at Salton Sea, not Salton Sea, at Oshkosh last year. So it's good to see them.
And I've also noticed too that everyone in the paramotor community just becomes your family. Once you start flying, you are now family. You're a brother, you're a sister.
Yeah, if we could keep it off social media, we'd do even better. I wish we could be as kind in social media as we are in person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at least in person, we're all family. That's all that counts.
Yeah. I see, I don't know, there's a question here from James. Does someone want to read it, or shall I just go ahead and try and answer it?
James was asking, do you think standards for instructor ratings should be increased via like taking an SIV course, basic collapse recovery drills, longer flight hours, etc.?
So I could answer it from a personal level, but I think, when I, for example, have talked to Steve at Midwest Parajet, I'm kind of down the path where I think not necessarily increasing sort of standards or requirements that requires us to document and jump through more hoops. I don't necessarily think that's a great idea, but I'm not totally adverse to, for example, maybe we should have an Airman Certificate. I'm required to have an Airman Certificate to fly a drone commercially because I have to understand the airspace that
I'm sorry, real quick. A what certificate?
An Airman Certificate. So
Airman's, okay.
Yeah, so an Airman Certificate basically means that you know weather and airspace. That's all it really entails. And I have to maintain that license every 2 years to keep flying drones commercially. So I'm not totally adverse to the idea that we should all have that, because it gives us a certain level of credibility when it comes to general aviation. But if you talk to some other people, we don't really need to have that kind of legislation, because a lot of the training programs that we have in place today are already teaching all those things. So, does it need more legislation? No, I don't think it does. I think so long as people are getting the material and they're flying legitimately and they're learning what they need to do, probably not. I can tell you that I was already teaching before I took an SIV. I kind of wish I'd taken the SIV before I started teaching. Knowing what those collapses are and how to deal with those things are all things that potentially could help, because your reactions and your knowledge is going to be better by having that additional training. So one of my biggest regrets, and it had to do with getting hurt early on in the flying, was that I didn't have, of course, I'm going to forget her name, but I did actually get to see them back at Salton Sea. It was a couple that took an SIV class with Andy Fuller out in Florida. And they hadn't been flying very long. I think they maybe had 50 flights, and they went and did this SIV. Excuse me. And I was blown away just how amazing they were and learning to do these additional skills. I know I didn't have the cojones to go do that, and here they were building their experience to make them feel more confident and so forth. So I think if you're an instructor, I think we have some kind of an obligation to know a lot more about difficult situations if we're going to come to teach. So I'm definitely a proponent that we should always be trying to learn and get better training and so forth, so that we can do a better job. I don't teach as much as a lot of other people do, and so I'm sure they might have a slightly different opinion, but I certainly don't think it can hurt. And I think the benefits are clear. If you haven't taken an SIV and you've been flying for a while, it's definitely a good idea. And I'm trying to make sure that I do one every 2 years. So my plan, I've done 2 already. I plan to do another one. And I know that they've helped. They certainly give me more confidence that when things go haywire, that 99% of the time, you know, unless you're pulling a major maneuver, these wings really do want to fly. And you can fix them or allow them to fix themselves relatively easy.
I'm just looking in the super chat. It looks like Kevin got a Beamer 3 reserve. I got a Beamer 3, and that's steerable. So I'm all about being able to steer myself someplace important after I throw a reserve. And I did throw one in the SIV course, which is, I think everybody should do an SIV and throw a reserve just so you know what it feels like. Harley, have you thrown a reserve yet?
I have. I did one in my first SIV, which was a planned throw. In my second SIV, I pulled 2 maneuvers when I was trying to do one, and I screwed up. And I landed up with one half of the wing tip totally tucked in. And, you know, I had Andy talking in my ear, and you know, I'd been shaken around pretty badly before that. And you know, he said, look, you have a choice. You can either collapse the wing and see if it comes back, or throw the reserve. And I regret not collapsing the wing and trying, because I had the altitude to play with it. And I still had the reserve in my back pocket. So I'm curious to do it again, because I think what I learned was, while I'd had enough, I could probably have recovered the wing. But nonetheless, I threw the reserve, and everything worked out great.
Awesome. Anybody in the super chat been to an SIV? What do you think about the SIV, if you did, or are you going to one? SIVs, I think, are great. Any other questions on the panel or chat before we jump to the next topic? What'd you say, Will?
Well, we're caught up in the chat with the questions in the chat.
Oh, we're caught up on the chat? Okay. All right. This is the one that is dear to my heart, because I think that an ADS-B for us is pretty, it would make things a lot safer. ADS-B out, you know, where we transmit where we are, so other pilots that are flying GA are able to see us. So if you wanted an ADS-B out right now, they do have some for drones. However, I believe now that I talked with Harley, it's actually illegal to have them, because we are manned and that's for an unmanned. So Harley, can you tell us a little bit about ADS-B, the portable, and you know, what are your takes on, and how do we get one? When do you think that everyone's going to have one in the future? Yeah,
so I think definitely the caravan paramotor incident in December last year sort of became a big catalyst, where more and more paramotor pilots are saying, look, I would like to have this added safety feature. So let me try and break it down into a couple things. First of all, right now, in terms of a small portable device, they're basically there's basically only one unit that's about $4,000 that's available to utilize, but there is a criteria to needing that. You can go to something that's a little bit bigger and kind of cobble sort of what would be considered the tail beacon in general aviation, and connect that to a little box and an external battery. I have a picture of it somewhere, and there are some people who have done this and make that work, and actually you can connect the app so that you can actually squawk properly. The thing about ADS-B is, particularly here in the United States, in fact, if I step back from outside the United States, in Europe and I think Canada and Australia, there already is a unit out there that's about $2,000. That's perfectly legal, and you set in your code and you can squawk. And so that way you can be seen typically by air traffic control and by general aviation overall. The problem is that particular device isn't authorized for the United States, and there are a few reasons for that. The other thing I should mention is that I'm part of a working group, and I believe Jeff Gorwin has also sort of taken up the lead to try and engage with the FAA to try and get something for us here in the United States. But basically, we're operating on 2 frequencies. It's kind of congested, especially with adding in drones. And even the way drones are going to utilize ADS-B is a lot different to the way it's used in general aviation. So the bad news is it's expensive. It's difficult to actually put something together that's small and portable. The big thing is you actually require an N number. In other words, the aircraft or vehicle has to be registered with the FAA. And that's not something that most of us want to go do for paramotoring. And until the FAA changes that rule and allows us to have some kind of a code that we can squawk or some kind of an easy registration where we don't have to have an N number, then maybe something will get better from this. So the bad news is you actually need to have a registered vehicle or aircraft. I'm actually going through that process right now because of a trip that I'm planning. And it's a bunch of paperwork and a slow process. So not one that I think most of us will want to go through.
And you said that you're a drone pilot, and I know that the laws are that drones have to have the ADS-B now. What's the difference between the drone ADS-B and like something that you see in GA?
Yeah, so basically the FAA, I believe it came into effect, was passed, I think, last year or the year before. And I think it comes into effect somewhere later this year. And I'm not quite sure whether there's a grandfathering process in. But in theory, all drones will have an RFID that can be transmitted through cell phone coverage. And so that will basically transmit those locations of where those drones and an identifier. And the requirement is primarily for commercial drone operations. Now, I don't know how that's going to grandfather in the majority of my drones because out of my fleet, I've only got 2 that have ADS-B in awareness. In other words, it can tell me when there are other aircraft in my vicinity. It's not particularly helpful because they're flying at 1,000 feet and I'm flying at 400 feet. So there's some challenges around that, and the technology only primarily works when you've got cell phone coverage. Well, occasionally I don't have cell phone coverage where I operate, and that stuff isn't going to work. So I don't know how the FAA is going to handle all that, but the bottom line is it's not necessarily an ideal situation for us as ultralight pilots, because once you get to a certain altitude, that doesn't work anymore because you no longer have cell phone coverage. So if you're flying at 5,000 feet and below and you've got decent coverage, maybe that type of technology could work for us. But to my understanding, it's not currently authorized for manned aircraft. And then, of course, if you're like me, who wants to go catch some big wind and you're operating 5 to call it 15,000 feet, well, that stuff just ain't going to work, and you're going to require something else that's battery operated and transmits through the frequencies that can be picked up by ATC and other aircraft. So the drone solution is really not one. And, I guess I'm going to just say this out loud. I don't think we could push the boundary with the FAA and say, look, we want something that's safer than having nothing. But I think that could also create some problems where maybe there's a better way to go about it. And unfortunately, I think it's just going to take more time. The FCC would have to be involved if we're talking around frequency controls. And I'm not an expert in this. There are some much smarter people that are part of this working group that are also trying to produce something and make a product that we could use here in the United States. But even that's going to have to go through some hoops with the FAA and the FCC to be able to bring that device to market at a reasonable price for us. So I mean, I think that the direction is good in terms of the technology, but there's nothing really that's too easy to adopt. It's certainly not at a decent price point. You know, the downside is now you've got to deal with an FAA registration. So those are all reasons why it's a challenge, but not impossible. The bigger issue is this, and so I want to raise it because I think there are some people who say, look, we don't need it. We shouldn't have this thing. I certainly don't want to be in the situation where the FAA says I have to have one. A lot of people in ultralights love the fact that we're so unregulated, and we don't want to be forced in a situation where, oh, now we have to start carrying certain devices to be able to keep flying. And I kind of agree with that.
I'm like you. I do not want to be regulated. I don't want to have them. But just like you said, if you're going to be flying over 500 feet, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 feet, it'd be really nice to have something, that will squawk out, to this jet that's doing 600 miles an hour at me, and can go, oh, there's an ultralight there. Let me go ahead and move a little bit so I don't, smash them like a bug.
So I can do this because as a general aviation pilot, I can tell you that, and in fact, this is true of the area that I fly in. We have a bunch of aircraft that are just outside of the Mode C Vale, which is 30 miles over a major airport. And none of those aircraft have ADS-B. And in fact, the club that I fly for have a bunch of T-41s that also do not have ADS-B in them. And they don't transmit, and they're not required to have them. So one of the benefits we have as paramotor pilots is that our hands are here and we're looking around, right? See and avoid. And so we actually have better peripheral view and better awareness than a lot of general aviation pilots. A lot of general aviation pilots now are staring at their iPads and following their GPS, and they're not looking outside of the airplane. And this is a growing problem in general aviation. So what we don't want to start having is bunches of paramotor pilots that are too busy staring at their phones to see what other traffic is around. Yes, being able to squawk out and not looking at a device can help create awareness for general aviation or air traffic control. But on the flip side, now maybe it gives paramotor pilots a comfort in flying a certain area, and their assumption is that other pilots are going to be looking to see if there's other traffic around, or that they even have flight following, or that air traffic control is even talking to them or can talk to them and tell them about that traffic. So the problem with the technology is that it can create this false sense of security that you can be seen and that someone can tell somebody else that they can be seen. And, I think it's a valuable tool to help create added safety, but I also don't think it's going to necessarily solve or avoid the types of situations that we saw recently that involved an aircraft and a paramotor. Now, we had a local guy here about 2 years ago that the aircraft didn't see him. He was flying. I mean, the paramotor pilot could see the rivets on the plane. That's how close he was. And neither the pilot nor the instructor on board that aircraft actually saw the paramotor pilot. Now, the instructors I've flown with all have their iPads out and they're looking for other traffic around before they do any maneuvers. So, had they had ADS-B, could they have maybe been seen? Perhaps, but there's no guarantee for it. So I think it's nice, it's good technology. I think if you're going to be flying higher or you're going to be flying in more congested airspace, could it be an added safety tool? Yes, but I don't think it necessarily solves the kinds of problems that we've seen out there. And they still are very, very rare. And for a lot of paramotor pilots, they don't fly where there's a lot of other aviation traffic. So I think there's going to be some balance, but the bottom line is right now, it's a challenge to have a product out there that's reasonably priced, and that is robust enough for us to be able to use with some level of frequency. And I fly through Class D airspace quite frequently. I talk to my tower. I fly a lot where there's a lot of other airplanes. I do kind of, I want to have one. And if I get to do one of the trips that I'm planning to do, I have to have one. So, but it means jumping through the hoop with the FAA, and I'm already 4 months in, and I finally got some good news this last week. They've assigned me an actual registration. The N number that I already own, they're going to transfer it. And so hopefully in the next couple of months, I'll actually have a registered paramotor that's going to allow me to do some things that I wasn't able to do before. But with that comes the potential that, you know, maybe I'm going to have to jump through some more hoops every once in a while. So,
well, if you have an N number, then you have the GA license to be able to fly it. The only reason why we can fly under FAR 103 is because, you know, it's not registered, it's experimental. But if you have an N number, does that mean that you have to have it inspected also and fly under your GA license?
These are things they haven't really clarified, and no, all the N number is really the registration of the aircraft. I don't probably understand as much as I probably do. There's guys like Eric Fairwell that might know a hell of a lot more, probably knows a lot more than I do. So I have an inspection of my Paramotor tomorrow, but that's actually for a waiver, not for my registration. So basically, I'm going to qualify for a home-built aircraft, and I guess with an N number, it's now going to be considered. I don't know if it's going to be considered a vehicle or an aircraft. That's a little unclear. And in theory, I'm still operating under 103 rules as a 103 pilot. It just so happens that I have a 107 and a part. I always get this confused. Part 61, I think, which is the aviation license.
Because I know that if your vehicle has ever been registered or certified as an aircraft, it can never fly under FAR 103. So that's just one of the things that popped up when you said that. So,
yeah, I mean, what I don't know, and I certainly hope won't be the case, is that, oh, you know, suddenly now my paramotor has to comply with Part 61 rules, which means I can only use it and take off from an airport. I have to fly 500 feet and above, and I can't fly under 103 rules. So
I think that's what's going to happen. I mean, if you have an N number, you can't fly under 103 anymore.
I have two paramotors, right? I'll have one that's, you know, licensed for one thing and one that's not licensed, I guess. I don't know.
It's interesting.
They haven't clarified that with me. My understanding, at least right now, is that my N number basically means I have registered my vehicle, not an aircraft. It's going to be considered a home-built vehicle. And that registration allows me to then use an ADSB with that same registration number and be able to actually squawk. It's the other thing I didn't mention about the ADSB, being able to squawk your 1200 by default is obviously great, because now you can be seen. But in theory, if you're going to enter controlled airspace, you need to be able to squawk whatever ATC tells you to squawk. And that's another complexity that we would have to deal with.
So your ADSB out is just a 1200?
No, the one that I'm looking to put into service will allow me to request flight following via my radio and be able to transmit whatever they tell me to squawk. So what's nice about that is they will actually monitor and follow me if I request it.
That's cool.
Yeah,
this is cool. I can't wait to see how this all works out in the future. I mean, this is just amazing. I mean, I love following this stuff. I love to see what people can do. I love to see these machines that people are building under FAR 103 being under 254 pounds and powered. You know, it's just amazing what people come up with, you know, to go fly. I mean, it feels like we're the Wright brothers, you know, in 2022.
Yeah, it definitely seems like the technology, I mean, the gliders are just, they've come such a long way in the last 5 years, let alone the last 10 or 15 years. We're seeing guys that are learning very quickly from other paramotors and taking the best out of different products and making their own. And who knows, I mean, a new guy with the the 2 fans either side, that thing looks amazing. That I got to figure out how I can let me fly it.
That was cool. Did you see the wingsuit? There's a new guy. There's a guy with a wingsuit that put on a double prop electric. So once he jumps, he can turn on his electric prop and be able to keep on going and actually gain altitude as wingsuit. I mean, amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. But yeah, so I don't know, to wrap up ADSB, it's not a slam dunk, and I think it's going to be, for many of us, something that's very selective, and hopefully we'll have the ability, with the right product that's approved by the FAA, it is something we can have as added safety when we need it.
Yeah, I wish that there's just an app that we can download and a little box that we buy and connect our dongle to it and turn on our stuff and use it if we want to. I know that there's a question out there. Eric, you want to ask that question, or whoever's supposed to be asking?
Yeah, I have a question on as far as the ADSB. Why can't, you have one that's small enough, just powered by a LiPo battery? And you say that we're not regulated, but they do require us to have blinky lights after sunset and stuff like that, but have a generic N number for ultralights.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is where the working group, and I haven't been too involved in sort of what's going on. One portion of the group is specifically looking to try and build a product that would be approved. And then I don't know, I haven't talked to Jeff Gowen about what he might be doing. But the idea of having something that's fairly easy, where you can plug in either it's go online and pay $5 and quickly register, and they give you some ID so that you can be identified and knows what your vehicle is, and then you plug that in, and now suddenly you're just squawking 1200 and you can be seen and identified as an ultralight whose speed is less than a certain amount. The reality is right now you can't go do that. And if you did, with the technology that's out there, like I looked at one for doing the coast to coast, and I could have bought the UK model and squawked whatever the hell I wanted. But the problem is, at some point the FAA would have caught up with me and said, why are you squawking at this power and doing things? You're not a registered aircraft. We don't want you to do that. And now you're in violation of some rule. So I don't want to suggest we do something that would get us into trouble. I think with the right people working on it, and there's enough aviation here in the United States, why we don't have something that's out the box available just like they have in Europe. It's a challenge, and I'm not very good explaining the technology side as to why that's problematic, but it has to do with the frequency and the FCC licensing, as well as the FAA rules that make that a challenge.
How about just Apple AirTags?
Yeah.
That's the easiest way to go. Any other questions about ADSB, the portable? Anybody in the super chat or anybody on the panel? If not, we're going to go to the next topic.
I got one thing to say. I got to go. And Harley, thank you very much for being on the show. I've never formally met you, but Jade and I both have followed you through your flight, across the US, which we thought was totally amazing.
Thank you.
So, but we will definitely search out every fly-in and try to find you.
Yeah, drop me a direct DM and let's try and connect sometime. I'm hoping to make some more trips back to the East Coast this year and try and do some more of the fly-ins. I'm hoping to make it to Oshkosh again. I didn't stay very long last time, but we'll see if we can make it work again this year.
All right, perfect. We will do.
Thank you.
All right, Linda, Sean, Will, See you guys, everybody in the chat. You guys all take care.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us tonight. All right.
I did want to say something about ADSB.
Yeah.
And I wonder if anybody has put the numbers together as far as a percentage of growth year after year for paramotoring. How quickly are we growing? It's got to be an exponential factor, you know. So anyways, there's that. On the
I wonder if anybody's in the chat knows what the growth has been. If you do know the growth, let us know in the super chat.
Yeah, if you have a number, that would be interesting. With the ADSB, I mean, I'm torn. I mean, the one thing that attracted me to the sport was the no regulation, that whole, you know, it was simple. And so on that hand, I hate it. On the other hand, I'm like, man, we got to do something. You know, we can't just do nothing. Eventually, it's going to get to the point where we're going to have to be able to identify the ATC or other aircraft.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I mean, if you think about it, how many people currently fly with an aviation radio, just for starters, right? In other words, you can listen to traffic. So in other words, if you're within 5 miles of an airport, well, typically general aviation is going to call out their positions, and you can listen to the traffic. You don't need ADSB. You don't need to monitor any form of free ADSB in if someone is transmitting. The problem is not everybody out there is going to be transmitting, and it's not just a paramotor or an ultralight thing. There's a lot of people in general aviation that aren't required to transmit through ADSB. And I have that here at the airports I fly at and around. And they're doing 200 knots, some of them. They're not required. They're vintage aircraft.
So what are the rules on that? Because I heard that in 2020 that you had to have ADSB out for all aircraft. I mean, what is the rules?
So I'm going to foo this up, but basically within a Mode C area, in other words, if there is a what's called a Mode C veil, which is basically a 30-mile perimeter around a particular airport, if you want to go inside of the Mode C veil to any airport, you're required to be able to have ADSB out and squawk your position. And of course, that's true if you go into a Class C or a Class B airport as well. So to enter those particular airports, which we basically as ultralights never go in anyway. It should be pretty rare that we would ever need to go into that airspace because we're just too slow. And those airports are B and C because they're busy and they've got big aircraft. So for example, I'm trying to think of a good airport here in the Bay Area. Probably even Concord is just outside of the Mode C veil, but let's just argue that there's an airport that's within GS space. Sorry, within it's a Class G airport, but it's within the 30-mile veil. If you are a general aviation aircraft, you are required to be able to squawk your ADSB. If you're on ultralight, you're not required because we don't have an electronic system and we're not required to do that. So when I fly down to the Golden Gate, I'm actually in the Mode C. And because I'm flying an ultralight, well, I don't have to squawk anything. Now that may change with an N number. I don't know yet. I guess I'll find out tomorrow. But so the reality is it's just a piece of safety, but for some aircraft in some areas it's required, and for a lot of the country not required, period. A lot of people fly in a lot of areas where they just don't need it.
Yeah, I fly out of a busy airport, and it's the radio, it's the communication that makes the difference.
Yep.
And oftentimes there's a guy that comes in, he's in a Citation jet, of course he's calling 20 miles out and this and that, and
right.
He's on the ground before I can enter downwind anyways.
Yeah,
but,
I spend a lot of time listening to the radio. I don't talk, you know, while I'm flying the paramotor, it's too noisy most of the time. They can't even hear what I'm saying if I'm trying to transmit. I have that problem when I fly into near Napa all the time. If I just want to skirt the edge of the airspace, it's kind of the pain in the butt because I'm just too noisy. So it's really difficult to have that conversation. So I think there's a balance, right? I mean, we've got strobes, now we've got GoPros, and we've got batteries, and it's attached to our head and to the side, and then we've got flashy lights, and you know, we're adding a lot of extra stuff. They can all fly right through our prop in a heartbeat. I think you know, for every pilot, they're going to have to create some form of a balance. And you know, I pick and choose how much technology I take with me based off the type of flying or the type of flight that I want to go do. I've stopped videoing most of the stuff that I go do. A lot of times I just go fly for myself, and I don't take anything more than my cell phone, so that if I run into trouble, hopefully I can connect. But if I'm flying in a bad area where cell phones are not going to work, I take my my inReach with me, where I can at least send a text out over the satellite and get somebody to know where I am. But we'll know that even that technology is not bulletproof. So I think people just need to pick and choose. And if they're going to do certain flying that has more risk, then take more technology with you. And hopefully you can package it in a way that makes sense for you, because it gets heavy. You know, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
You know, when I did the coast to coast, I had redundancy. I had 2 radios. I had an iPad and an iPhone for navigation. I had inReach. We had 360 to follow. I mean, like, just piles and piles of technology, batteries to heat my vest, batteries for my gloves. It's pretty intense. You know, 2 sets of wires coming out of my helmet.
I mean, you made the point was just perfect. I mean, yes, what I said was, yeah, I just want to keep the sport like pure, but you're exactly right. I'm adding all the bells and whistles, you know, the lights and the cameras and all the stuff. So, but the problem is, I guess, ADS-B just does not look cool. If they could come out with an ADS-B that was also had some cool flashing lights and
well, I mean, if you register the Paramotor, you can go get one of those tail beacons. Here's your flashy light right now. You know, it's bulky. You know, you hook it up just a regular battery. It's all great. You know, LiPo battery, and it lasts for hours.
yeah.
But it can all add up, and then just trying to package it and kind of takes out some of the fun. And that's what I like about PPG, is like, put the thing on my back. I kind of wish I didn't even wear, you know, I'm jealous of the beach guys, literally no shoes, a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, you know, John Ripper there, and sticks it on his back, and out comes the glider, and there's just enough wind, and it just lays itself out and launches itself. I mean, that's like a day of flying with Dell out there in Texas. You know, it's the easiest flying you could do in the world. I get a little jealous of that environment versus, you know, I fly 3 different airplanes at the club that I'm at. I've got like this little Cessna that, I mean, literally you pull it out the hangar, you do your walk around, you check everything, you turn the key and it fires up and you go. Versus, you know, the Archer 3s have got all these glass panels, and I spent another 15 minutes trying to remember how to get through all the glass panels to make sure everything's working, and the GPS, and that my redundancy is all working. And I'm like, oh my God, I just spent $30 in fuel trying to figure out how all the glass works again. And so I don't want paramotoring to be that way for me either. You know, when I do these big trips, and I need safety and I need more tools, fair enough. But
it's always good to have a ground crew when you do that. And since we are talking about your 50X and your coast to coast, go ahead and for those of you that don't know, tell us about your 50X, all the different states, and then go to your coast to coast and explain, you know, the logistics of that, which is just blows my mind.
Yeah. So the 50 state tour was, just this idea, I had gone back to business school and graduated and said, no one wants to hire me. What am I going to do? And I say, when you graduate college, you travel, right? So that's how the 50 state tour was born. And if I'm going to drive and go see all 50 states, well, I sure as hell I'm going to fly a paramotor in all 50 states. And so that's how that was all born and came together. And then of course I wanted to raise $1,000 in every state, and so I raised about, I don't know, $25,000 or $30,000 for charities through the course of that trip. I mean, there are some people trying to catch me. I know Ross on the Go, and it was somebody else. I mean, there are plenty of people that have done 30, 40 states now, and gone to them and flown in them. And I think Jeff Golwin is, I think when I last talked to him, he was in the mid 30s or somewhere around about there. So I encourage everybody to do it. There's a paramotor pilot everywhere, even if he's not flying. I mean, that's kind of how the Coast to Coast was born too, because when I did the interview with EAA, they said, well, what are you going to do next? And I hadn't really thought about it. I was like, well, I don't know. And so I just joked about it. So I don't know, maybe when I get back there, I'll just, fly right across the country this time. And it was a joke. And, I got back to California and everything was locked down, and more so than any other state I'd been to. And I was just like, this is not the life I'm signing up for. And so Ray Pierce, who had followed me since the beginning and was in Wyoming, I spent a week out at his place, had said, like, if you go do this, like, I'm in. And so I had called him up that September, like, 4 months after I finished the 50 state, and said, are you serious? And he said, yes. And that became the catalyst to everything else. He roped his brother in. Then I got Dave Wirt involved. I got Doc involved. And then, I needed someone in media, and I needed somebody to video the whole thing. So that's how Greg and Cynthia came on board. And then I was having problems getting the access to the beach out in San Diego. And so Paragringo came on board and opened some doors for me. So that's how the whole team came together. I mean, just 7 or 8 of us in total. It was just extraordinary how all of us were pilots, and knew what the job was and came together and just made it happen. And so leading up to it, right, I had, sort of planned the route, figured out that I wanted to go airport to airport, where all my outs were about every 25 miles. Turned out I could do a lot more miles. I think I was planning 50 to 75 mile legs. And then in reality, I was flying 120 to 150 mile legs. So a lot less takeoff and landings than originally I thought I would have to do. So there's strategically, I mean, even leading up to it, there was all the planning and then getting everyone into those meetings. And then we started having weekly meetings leading up to when we thought we would pull the trigger. And are we ready? Yes, we're all ready. And then, hey, Dave, is the weather going to cooperate? And then Dave says, well, I think you've got a 2-week window. And then we pulled the trigger, and like literally we had the meeting on the Sunday, and 3 days later, we'd all come from all over the country and got together at Gringo's place in San Diego, and the whole thing just came together. It was just absolutely extraordinary. But lots of planning. I had done the Paramotor Nation show. Then Leo was like, "Oh, we've got to get you hooked into FAI and the NAA and try and get official records going here." And all of that needed more time to get that stuff to come together the way it should have come together. So, what took 6 days, well, it took 8 days to fly, probably took 80 to 100 days to plan. And that's how it is with these next couple of trips that I'm trying to do. It's months and months of, spinning the saucer and talking to some people and figuring some stuff out. And then, logistically, it's a nightmare to actually do these trips. Sometimes is a lot easier. Just
Do
go
you
do
have
them and hope for the best.
do you have multiple like paramotors and wings to use? That way you have like a fresh one the next day, or how do you do it that way?
Yeah, I just got a stack of them.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, at least two, right? One that somebody works on or takes care of while you're flying, and then you swap out every day, type of thing. I don't know. I mean, that's a lot of flying. That's a lot of maintenance, a lot of wear and tear.
Yeah. So I owned I had a Blackhawk Kestrel V3 with my Vitarazi on it, and that got me through all the 48 contiguous. I flew other machines that I had to fly out to those states for, and I had just my snake for virtually all of those states. So just one glider, come hell or high with the weather, and made it work.
Wow.
Coast to coast, Blackhawk and Corsair sponsored the engine and frame, and Paradrenaline and Dudak lent me and essentially sponsored the wing for the coast to coast trip. So I only had two wings. I thought I needed three, and as it turned out I needed more than two, because I chopped the lines on one of them 1,000 miles in, and then was there flying the Snake, which wasn't the ideal glider, although thank God with the progress I had made, it worked out just fine. Recently, with the help from London IV and Cloudbase, I have 3 gliders now, and technically a 4th one if I get my Snake back. That's in getting a whole brand new set of lines, and the gliders passed all the other tests, but it needed a new set of lines. So
Well, it's a new lines. It's a new glider.
it is a new glider.
Yeah.
I'm a little tempted to sell that glider, although it has quite a lot of nostalgia for me because it has flown in all 48 states, or the contiguous states, and it has also done half of the coast to coast. So it's going to be with a heavy heart that I sell it, but anyone wants to buy a piece of history, maybe, that glider, I'm literally, once I get it back with the lines, it's going to be at a very, very good price to let it go. My Vitarazi that flew in the 48 contiguous states, and either that frame or maybe even my Elite is going to be up for sale. So my plan is to part with the additional engine that I have, although it's kind of nice knowing I've got 2 units. But I have my eyes on something else. I just don't know when and how, so that I have another Corsair engine. But that's where the crew really paid off, right? I mean, what a lot of people didn't realize was I was flying for 7.5 hours per day, but we had about another 7 to 10 hours of work every day between getting up early, double checking all the equipment, actually fine tuning the carburetor for that few legs of the trip. That was all Ray's job. And so Ray, his first hour of the day was getting my machine ready, and as everybody else did, got their side of their jobs done. My job was to talk to Dave Wirt, who'd already been up for a couple of hours to look at the weather and tell me what I had to do. So we literally did that trip with 2 wings and 1 motor is how we did it. So, that I kind of like being able to say that, because the reliability of the equipment today is so good. If you do sufficient maintenance, not ridiculous amounts of maintenance. I mean, I see some guys that are tinkering all the time and then wonder why they have problems, and they spend more time tinkering than they do flying. Whereas, I'm doing just the right amount of maintenance for the amount of flying. I could probably do a little more maintenance. But the machines are so reliable. I feel just as safe planning a general aviation flight as I do a paramotor flight, because I believe my equipment is going to work the same. And while the inspection requirements are maybe a little greater, I mean, they're every 50 hours for the airplanes that I fly. If I do my paramotor every 50 hours. It's about as reliable for the most part. And I trust my gear. So that's how I can do these long trips, a lot of times unsupported too.
That's crazy. Now I know that we got about 20 more minutes until 9, so we've been talking for a while. I know that you said that you could talk for hours and hours, and I know you can, but we'll try to wrap it up here in the next 20 minutes. That everybody has lives. I mean, we got to go back to somebody and something, right? I mean, can't just stay on here forever. I wish we could. But anyway, yeah, oh yeah, real quick, any questions in the super chat? Any questions on the panel for Harley?
I think we lost the audience. I talked too long.
No, that's what they came here for. They came here for you, bud.
Yeah, it's been fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Really enjoyed. Yeah, I mean, perfect. So
it's like every time that I do one of these, podcasts, even if we don't have a guest, I always learn something. And that's what it's all about. This is about just learning, telling your experience on what you're doing, learning from other experienced pilots. And Harley is very experienced. I mean, he hit every state already went across the whole United States. I mean, I would love to be able to do what you do. I mean, I love listening to you because, I mean, it gives me that hope that maybe one day I can follow in Harley's footsteps and fly from coast to coast. One of these days I might hit, at least the 48 states.
Well, I think my comment to that is, yeah, we all have commitments and, other things that get in the way. But if it's something you really want to do, I think what I hoped I demonstrated was that what I did was 100% accessible to almost anybody. It wasn't even that crazy expensive. I mean, basically for about, I don't know, $500 a state, I saw 50 states. That's pretty amazing, and got to fly in them. So it didn't cost that much money. And sure, it took 7 months. I could have done it in 2 or 3 months. I wish I'd taken twice as long. So, my encouragement to you and to anybody else, maybe chew it off in smaller pieces, but go do it. It's very accessible. And it's not anywhere near as expensive as you might think it is. Yeah, the bigger trips and that kind of thing, they're more difficult, but pick the stuff you can do on your own. You really don't need an entourage. And sometimes it's just quicker and easier to do it that way.
There's a lot of places out there to fly.
Yeah. We're here to fly. I've been trying to figure
do
out.
it. I mean, I mean, that's, as I said, what I hoped I demonstrated was that anybody can do this. I'm never going to be, Matt Minyard or, some of these other guys that, even Judson is coming so far in some of the maneuvers that he is doing. I'm never going to be that kind of a pilot. Yeah, I'm developing skills very slowly, but I'm an XC pilot because I sit in the seat and I go places. And that's the fun.
I think so too. It's, to me, it's the adventure. I mean, me as an old guy, I want to get up there, look around, fly around, check things out, XC, I love that, 2.5 hours, 2 to 2.5 hours every time I launch, I'm up there. Unless it's cold, then it's like maybe 20 minutes because my hands are frozen. But, I during the summertime, absolutely. In the morning, burn 5 gallons of gas going out and flying. If it's a good midday, might do midday. But in the evening, I'm going to go out and burn another 5 gallons. I mean, I love to fly. But just like you said, I'm not going to be doing wing overs and flips and twists and barrel rolls and infinites. That's not what I want to do. I like the XCs. Anybody that's listening, do you guys like all the acro stuff, or do you like the cross country, or just buzzing around your LZ? Let us know in the super chat what you like. Will, what do you like as far as flying? Are you an XC guy or?
I'm more of a low and slow kind of
Low
guy.
and slow?
Like close to the ground and carving some fields, and I tell you, the sport is just, it's amazing, and you don't appreciate it until it's gone. And by that I mean I've averaged 5 flights a day for the last 2 years. No, I mean 5 flights a day.
Wow.
5 flights a week for the last 2 years, but I've only flown twice in the last month and a half. because of my leg injury. So, so I'm back up, and it's just like, oh man, yes, this is why I love this sport.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, I want to see this sport go on and become a success. And, just, I defend it with a passion, and
Yes.
we have to. I mean, we're on the verge of something that it's going to be huge. It's obvious. It's just going to outgrow itself, So I want it to grow right and in the right direction, and I want it to be safe, so the kids can do it, I mean, I want them to feel what it is that I felt up there.
And it's so neat too when you go to like a fly and you see, 8, 9, 10-year-olds flying paramotors, which is amazing.
Yeah, I think Jade, she's got a 14-year-old coming on her show, who flies, and then of course Wyatt. He was 11 when I met him at.
Oh, was it 11? Okay, I was trying to. Yeah, I was trying to remember Wyatt, how old he was, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny because he was at Sultan too, and I had met him right before his first official solo ride. And he's such an incredible inspiration, really. Way older than his years. He was driving a car down at Sultan, and his mom was like, well, prefer him to be flying. He knows what he's doing up there.
So you have talked to him. So I mean, you hear all these, I don't know, words coming out of this little boy's mouth that doesn't seem like it should be coming out of this little
I was
boy's
like an
mouth.
adult. And can you imagine if we started flying when we were 10 years old?
We should all be that lucky to have been sitting next to Matt Minyard for so many years. I mean, he has a way, he can articulate things about gliders that most of us can't. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's impressive. He knows his stuff. Any chance you'd be making it out to Bad Apples this year?
I really would like to. I almost came out last year. I wanted to do Endless Foot Drag as well. I got to find a way. The problem is I have a business that's finally recovering, and I really do. I want to just goof off and go flying, go do all these things.
Yeah.
But it's a constant battle. But I think I'm going to find a way this year to do it. I think things are recovering where, as much as I would like to make a little bit more money and be able to do some more cool stuff, I'll sacrifice the earnings in a heartbeat to go do this flying. So the problem is it's such a long way to drive, especially with the camper, and I really need to build a van out. So one of these days.
Right. Awesome.
Even Oshkosh is difficult. It's 30 hours of driving each way, and it just costs a bundle.
Yeah, that's the rough part. Yeah, I think Bad Apples I'll be able to go. When is Bad Apples, by the way? I don't have that written down. I forgot. Anybody know offhand?
It's in May, I think.
May
16th. Let's see, I'll tell you for sure.
May of 2022, Bad Apples.
May 12th through the 15th.
12th through the 15th. I will be there or be square. If I'm not there, something happened horrible, and I don't even think about it. I mean, I'm going to do everything I can to get to Bad Apples. I really enjoyed Bad Apples. I enjoyed everyone that was out there. I enjoyed flying that open mine that had the different color water out there. Was great flying around. I didn't fly the different places, but they said that there's so many different places around Bad Apples that was just incredible. So
I think I need to become a ferry pilot where I can ferry an aircraft across the country and basically have a free ride.
That'd be really nice to be able to pick up pilots along the way in different airports. Just throw it in the airplane and keep on going to Bad Apples.
Right. The worst case scenario is maybe I just come out with no paramotor either. Just the camaraderie and getting to see everyone is really the fun part. And I've flown at that field before, so I know Hodgesfield pretty well.
How many people would say, "Here, Harley, use my equipment,
Yeah.
go fly, have fun"?
I don't think anybody.
No, I'm sure they would. I mean, I'm sure they would, and then they'd probably have you sign it. Can you sign my paramotor now that you flown it? Sign my wing.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I got to sign was my original 50 state boots, which as far as I could tell, Dave Ruff wasn't even able to auction those off.
Oh no!
I think it cost me more to send them to him than he was able to get for them.
That's funny.
Austin did have a question. Well, he poses a question in the chat, and he says he's a lift paramotor. He says, "Do we want it to grow? Do we want the sport to grow?" And yeah, I mean, I don't really think we have a choice now.
Well, I mean, it's going to grow, but how many people do you know started flying and now they are not flying anymore? Or they're only fair weather pilots, or they've flown so much they're like, I'll fly one of these days. You know, I mean, I'm almost to the point that, no, not really. I mean, I've flown so much that there's been really nice days that I could have gone flying, but I'm like, you know what? How about I just hang out with my wife and walk the dogs? Where I could have flown is beautiful day. So how many people are going to get into the sport, go fly, and then go, all right, I had fun, and stop?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's big. You know, there's definitely high turnover in the sport, but I think that's true of aviation in general. And a lot of it, sometimes people's lives transition or change, and that has an impact. You know, either it brings them into the sport and keeps them in, or it brings them in and then they go out and so forth. So I think, you know, different parts of the country too, and different weather patterns, all of those have pretty dramatic impacts as to how the sport sort of evolves and grows in those areas. I mean, if we could all live in Florida and southern Texas, we'd probably all fly a hell of a lot more than we do.
Or even fly, or even go to like school. They get a bunch of flights under the belt, and they want to buy a paramotor wing, and they got to work for the next 2 years to be able to
Yeah, they gotta go back to school.
Then they have to go back to school. But once you pay for school, you can always go back for free, right?
Right. I mean, it's probably not as big of a challenge as it is for us here in the Bay Area, but I don't really want to just beat up on California, but you know, we seem to be legislating ourselves into a box. And the other thing that I'm really not liking, particularly here in the Bay Area, is that you've got a lot of Karens and Kevins that are, you know, squeaky wheels. And it seems that what the counties and law enforcement are always doing is they're trying to, you know, curtail, you know, the noisy squeaky wheel that says, oh, I don't want that activity here, or they woke me up. And, you know, you can fly perfectly legal and even be very respectful about the areas that you fly and try not to create a problem. But, you know, it's very, very difficult for us here in the Bay Area to get access to any land or property to be able to fly from. And a lot of the local pilots drive an hour, sometimes 2 hours to get to places where they can fly. So if you live in an area that's very, very congested, or you know, maybe it's a bunch of local parks. So we have East Bay parks that control a huge number of the parks for the various different counties. And they have a rule that just says, no, you can't fly drones and you cannot fly anything in these parks. And they're set up so that the majority of people who sat behind a computer can walk. And then they lease the land out to farmers so that they can graze their cattle and they can make it good for farmers. So when we try and fly over it, sometimes they tell us we can't do it, even though we're doing it legally. And there've been a few run-ins with East Bay parks that have ordinances that aren't even legal. And they're there to really just persuade us not to go there because it's too much of a hassle and we don't want to deal with them. And they always want to find something. In fact, there was one officer one day that actually threatened like 4 of us pilots that were there. And I mean, we had her dead to rights at that point for threatening us, but she was like, I'll find something that I can write you guys up for. And, you know, unfortunately, those kinds of run-ins, I've seen a lot more of as the sport has got bigger and there's more of us flying. And so I love flying with my local guys, but a lot of times I fly solo because it draws less of attention. And I don't get people walking up on me. The moment I'm flying with a bunch of other guys, and it just happened to me at Pinal, where, you know, I took my crew with me, and we went there, and we went to try and find out where we could take off and where we could go and so forth without any problems. It was a NOTAM for skydivers. And we, you know, I flew all the way around, did everything 100% legitimately. And then we still got walked up by some guy who didn't identify himself, who said that I flew over a federal building there. Even though the charts say that it's perfectly legal to fly there. In fact, I can fly right over the Air National Guard. The only thing you can't do with the Air National Guard is fly a drone over it.
Mhm.
Now, no one wants to piss the Air National Guard off, so you avoid that little area. But because I flew right up to the edge and I didn't fly over this particular piece of the property, they walked up on us and basically were fairly persuasive in saying, well, we can't stop you, but, you know, we're trying to tell you you know, we drop things out of the sky. And my argument was, well, if you drop things out of the sky, then the FAA says you have, you know, make sure it doesn't hit anybody on the way down. And so making that argument wasn't fair. But I see this more and more where, you know, either people in authority or a squeaky wheel is making it more and more difficult. And it's very difficult to find places to fly here in the area of Northern California that I live in, which is, once again, why I like to use airports, because getting access to property is hard. So I think everyone's different and everyone's area is different and so forth, but it's tough around here.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, our airport is right down the road, and it doesn't take me very long to pack up, go to the airport, and fly pretty much anywhere I want to. And there's other little airports all around here that I can, you know, hop to. I can hop from this airport to another airport to different. I mean, it's farmland as far as I can see, rolling hills. We're pretty lucky over here. I forgot about you guys that are in congested areas. All you guys in the super chat, if you're still here, I mean, it's almost 9 o'clock my time. Are you able to fly from airports or fields, or what is your favorite LZ? Let me know in the super chat as we're ready to wind down our podcast now. I've learned a lot. I understand more about that ADS-B than I did before first talking to you. Safety, of course, is extremely important. I'm glad that we went over safety. It was fun to talk about the different airports, and mine is not towered, and nobody really cares what you do as long as you don't, you know, run into anything. Thank goodness. Your coast to coast is amazing. I know that you're still doing a lot of editing, and that's going to be coming out sometime this year, right? Late this year, or when do you think that's going to come out?
Greg is on his way back to Canada, I think, tomorrow, and he's going to be basically dedicating a bunch of time now that he's finished with Parajet. And that you know, once we get the edit done, the hardest part is going to be distribution, and we'll have to make some tough decisions. It's going to cost a fair amount of money for us to finish doing the edit, and so I've got to find a way to foot the bill for that. But once it's done, either it'll be the legacy I leave behind, or with some luck we'll get it distributed and try and recover some of those costs and hopefully get it out there. You know, there'll be a part to the story that most people don't know about me and so forth. So it's going to have a human side to it other than just the flying.
Do you have a time frame you're shooting for, or?
Well, we said last year, you know, I think we'll have a finished product, you know, during the course of this year. I'm hoping by the middle of the year we'll have have something ready to distribute. The question is whether we can get it distributed this year. If you look at a lot of the documentaries that are out there that are sort of made in this style, talking about people's great adventures, you know, sometimes it's a few years to get it distributed through any of the networks that are out there. If we rush it too quickly, then obviously the ability for us to recover the cost to finish the production becomes limited. So
Do you have a GoFundMe or something like that, or a Kickstarter?
there is a GoFundMe for the 50X challenge, which is still up there and running, but I haven't pursued collecting money from anybody. So I think all the money that I got during the 50-state tour and coast to coast, I landed up donating anyway to Resurgence. So, I mean, unfortunately, you know, I don't know. I'll take whatever comes, and we'll find a way. I'm not worried.
If you Kickstarted or GoFundMe, you know, let us know. You know, we're all family. We would love to be able to help you, you know, to do this project. You know, everybody sending $5, $10, $20 to you in the community can definitely help with production cost. And
yeah, it does. I mean, I want to get something finished. So I think initially I'll take a little bit of money out of the retirement, and we'll get something made. And then once we've got it made, if when we get around to distribution, if people want to help out at that point, I think that would be fantastic.
you need to put it on Netflix too.
We're going to try. That's a pretty challenging thing to go do, but we probably have a one-shot deal at that, and so we've got to have our ducks in a row.
That'd be pretty cool.
Harley, you are awesome, man. I mean, you're such a great ambassador for the sport. I mean,
Thank you. Appreciate that.
it's a
You guys
pleasure.
too, man. I mean, you guys, I see you guys all over it all of the time. I really do feel a little embarrassed sometimes when you guys give me those kudos, because there's so many other great guys doing some cool stuff. You know, I'll mint you right now. He's out there on, you know, this Sandor. I mean, those guys do so much to promote the sport and share. And I'm just one guy, man. Everybody plays their part.
There you go.
It's a big family. It's a big family, and we all support each other, and we all learn from each other, which is amazing. And I love learning from everybody. I love hanging out with people at fly-ins on Monday nights, being able to, you know, sit here and talk with you guys and get different guests. We got the 3D printers rolling in the back. I'm printing different things up and trying to, you know, come up with different throttles and different things for paramotors. I'm actually trying to, and I hate to say this out loud because somebody else is going to do it before me, is I'm trying to 3D print a paramotor.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
I'm working on that right now, and I just got another couple boxes of filaments, so my machines are working overtime. We'll see if that works out for us.
That would be a great video. especially
Caleb
if
in
you-
my local group just printed a flight box where he can have his camera and his cell phone. Like when he opens it up, it actually pulls the cell phone up ready to go.
Nice.
It looks amazing. So yeah, whenever I hear people 3D printing, I get kind of excited, because it definitely, you know, it's a passion to go do that with the time you guys have to spend.
Right.
Yeah, there's even a filament called a TPU that's you know, flexible. So I'm actually trying to figure out a way of doing flexible, you know, strings, not strings, but, you know, some way of making the netting for the paramotor. So it's interesting. My brain's going nonstop, and you know, I just don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, to jump on Facebook and talk with people, and YouTube. My YouTube channel is so slow right now. I haven't done any videos. I'm working with different people, different students, and I'm just having a good time. I mean, this is all I do from sun up to sundown. I'm paramotor. That's all I do.
Hey, well, congratulations on 21,000, over 21,000 subscribers, Sean. That's awesome, man.
Do I?
Yeah,
Pretty cool.
Wow.
yeah.
No, really? Let me go look. Are you serious?
I think so.
Very cool.
No.
Yeah, look at you, Grandpa.
Nobody wants to watch my stuff.
Yes, they do.
Oh,
You're
no,
wrong.
not at all.
I mean, they want to watch Will Fly stuff. I mean, Will Fly, your stuff is hit heavily. I mean, 3, 4, 10,000 views per thing that you put out. I put something out, it gets 10, 15, 20 views. I'm like, woohoo, 20
Yeah,
views.
but look at your subscribers, man. They love PPG Grandpa.
Oh, I guess I do almost have 22,000.
See? Yeah, see? I think it climbed
I-
another 1,000 while we were on the show.
See, I'm a little behind you guys. Maybe a lot.
just a wee bit, but yeah, I one of the things that I do want to do in the future here is to do not teaching paramotor how to fly, but teaching all the other stuff that people that if they do want to self-train, at least they understand airspace, weather, the different apps that you can use. Just there's so many things that if you're looking to self-train, there's no YouTube videos that teaches you all the stuff that you don't know that you don't know. And even if you do train at a big school, I want to have things that people can watch and go, oh, well, that's how you do that. Because how many people were trained on how to put a chase cam on your wing? How many people are learn these little small things that we learn as paramotor pilots later on, but not in the school and not online. I want to do a lot of maintenance online too, where I can show this is how you do the maintenance on a Moster 185. I'm getting that Corsair. I got a Atom 80. So I want to do a lot of things that are beneficial for the paramotor community.
Yeah, that's
Hey,
exciting.
Bill H says, congratulations, Sean. And John Wayne has an awesome idea, Harley. You can sell the video in advance. He says he'd buy it.
Pre-order, yes. Do pre-orders, Harley.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, pre-order this. Yeah. Let me give you my credit card right here. Go ahead, take it.
Yeah.
Take my money here. Here, take it all. I don't need this stuff. It's just green. It's just laying around here. But yeah, that's a good idea, Harley. Pre-order. Do some pre-orders.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, we keep working the strategy, and right now the big push is to just get a finished product ready to go, and we made that decision earlier this year, and initially we were trying to see whether we could get funding to help finish it off, whether we could sell the raw footage and have someone else produce their own movie from it. I have a book that I need to finish writing. Literally, I've got 2 more chapters to write for the front end and the back end, and we've got something. So it's just tough, to create the motivation and get it out there, and then hopefully people watch it or pick it up, and that's the hard part. That really is. So finished product right now. We've got to everyone should just be pinging Greg on Greg Anthony Harris. If you haven't been to his channel, then go to his channel, subscribe, and leave him a message saying, hey, finish this video.
I left his link down below. I left all of your links down below, Harley, and below it I gave a special thanks to Greg Anthony Harris, and I left his YouTube channel link down there too. So if you guys haven't gone to Harley's links, go down there, click his links, subscribe, like anything that you got to do. I don't even know what you do, right? You go one place,
Click all the buttons.
Yeah, just click buttons. Just click them and go there and click, right? And we definitely appreciate all of you guys that are watching this every Monday night. I know that there's so many other things you could be doing. You could be watching TV, you can be with your significant other, you can go walk the dog, but you're sitting here. Well, maybe you're not sitting here. Maybe you have it on, you're walking around and doing something and you're listening to us, but thank you very much. We appreciate you. Not only do we get a couple hundred people that are on here, that watch it on here, but we get a lot more people on the audio through our audio podcast, and we have lots of people that listen to that all over the world. You can find us pretty much anywhere, even on Amazon, Audible, all your favorite podcasting apps. Just go to or search for PPG Grandpa, PPG Grandpa's Paramotor Podcast, or even Paramotor Podcast, you'll probably find us. And we definitely appreciate you listening so much. And if Harley does do the pre-sale type of thing, let me know. And what we can do is every week we can donate a pre-sale to a winner, and I'll send you the money. So
that's awesome.
let us know how we can help you out, because we would definitely love to do it.
That's very cool. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions in the chat? Anything from us on the panel?
I've learned so much in the last couple of years, last few years that I call it, I co-host the show, PR the show or whatever, but I look forward to Monday nights, and I love getting out there and looking for that guest. And Harley, thank you so much. You are like the most humble guy ever. I mean, we're just honored to have you seriously on our show tonight. And I thank you for your time and everything, for hanging out with us tonight on Monday night and all that good stuff.
There's nobody in the chat that said, I don't know Harley. Everybody knew you.
Yeah, not one.
Everybody knew you.
Someone said Tucker who?
Yeah.
They knew Harley.
Yeah, Tucker who, but we know Harley. That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. A lot of people are excited about the show tonight, they're like, cool, Harley's gonna be cool. So very good.
So Harley, how do we get up with you? I know I have all the links down below, but for all the people that are listening to this podcast and they're not watching this live, how do we get up with you? And what social media do you use?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you can direct message me through Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and even TikTok. So pretty much.
What do we search for to find you?
Just search for 50X Challenge, and you should be able to find me that way. Yeah, I think most people hit me up through Facebook, but Instagram's pretty popular, and even my TikTok's growing, not as fast as a few others, but it's growing.
Can we Snapchat you too?
I do have a Snapchat.
Do you really? Is it 50X also? 50X Challenge?
It is not 50X, unfortunately.
All right. That's awesome.
Yeah, most people probably DM me through Facebook or Instagram, but honestly, I monitor all that stuff. It eventually gets to me somehow.
Awesome. Well, like I said, all the links are down below here, and when we do the audio podcast, I'll put all of your links there too. Harley, it was so awesome to chat with you again. I mean, our last time we chatted was episode 24, and now we're in season 3, episode 110. Hopefully that we don't have to wait till episode 200 to see you again. You're more than welcome to hang out with us anytime that you're not flying.
Well, thank you. Hopefully I'll get something done in the next few months and have something more to talk about.
As if you haven't done enough.
I know. That's
Dang.
I hear him and he's like, I need to go do some flying because I haven't flown in a while.
I have like 4 pretty major trips that I really want to go do that are just logistically an absolute nightmare. The one that I think is doable this year, it's a little scary because it's not a slam dunk. It's 100% unsupported.
Wow.
It's flying a route at a time of the year when it's not ideal. So
Interesting.
I got to figure it out, and it's a little scary. It's the first 400 miles alone are very, very difficult. So we'll see. We'll see if I pull it off or become a statistic.
Wow. Are you thinking about doing the Icarus race in the future?
I would love to do Icarus. Obviously there was a fair amount of talk about maybe it coming out here this year. So I'm down. Hopefully I don't embarrass myself. If I do it, I've got to do it well. And there's some tough people to go up against. There's some very, very talented pilots out there that have got skills. you know, yeah, I made it look good, but you've got to nail it to compete. And of course, if I do it, I want to do well.
Absolutely. Well, I've always said that I want to do Icarus race. I don't think it'll be this year, but if they do start doing it again next year,
Thinking about it, huh?
have to, yeah.
So, you know, I'll mention this too, right? You know, everyone's talking about Icarus, but you know, one of the things that I found with cross countries was a lot of people kind of find it hard to get into cross country flying because they don't have someone who can support them, or they try and do it with a couple of other guys, and of course everyone wants to fly, and so it's a little more difficult. But you know, there are a few people now doing these adventure flights, right? I mean, you can go to One Up Adventure, talk to Travis and to Ali, and you could do a trip. Like I have an invitation, not through them, but to go to Egypt later this year. So that's an extreme one, right? But by contrast to that, you've got Jean-Francois, who, you know, has a few trips planned where you can basically go and do a 200 or 300-mile trip over a few days and go do that kind of thing. So I think there's actually a business model out there. I kind of wish I could just pull it together and say, right, okay, well, I'm going to put on a trip from here to here, and I'll be the support crew for a whole bunch of other people to fly, and I can provide the advice to go do that. So, and if you're part of a local flying group, one of the cool things with my local group is they'll do fly camping, where they'll fly 35 miles, go land and camp for the night, and fly back in the morning. Do that with your local group. There's a lot of opportunity to go do this kinds of cool things.
Absolutely. Sounds, yeah, there's just so many things you can do as a paramotor pilot, you know. I mean, when I say cross country, and Will said he likes low and slow, I like cross country low and slow. You know, it's not just I'm going to get up to altitude and fly. I'm talking about, yeah, like Will said, low and slow, go someplace, have a, you know, find some cool things. On my last trip, I found a abandoned truck that was half buried.
Right.
How cool is that? I got that on video. Flying and seeing bald eagles flying above you and below you. That's awesome too. I wish that we could talk a lot more. It's already almost 9:30. I cannot believe we talked for 2.5 hours. This is insane because it just went by like snap.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it, does it?
No, that's the reason why, you know, I think our longest podcast was like 4 or 5 hours. We just yap.
All right, let's cut this one off then.
You know, you don't want to go for 5 hours. I mean,
I can't do that.
Well, once again, thank you so much, Harley. I appreciate you.
2.5 hours and like, oh, that's enough.
I appreciate you jumping on and yapping with us for such a long time. We'll fly. Eric and Jade, and of course our Paramotor USA, Linda Anderson. You know about all the different shows out there. If you don't know, Monday nights, it's with me, PPG Grandpa. You can find me at ppggrandpa.com, iflyparamotors.com, and of course, we go under ClearPropTV.com. And we also have the audio, which is paratalk.org. And we do this every Monday night, even if, except for last Monday, but we still put a one out there with Doug Martin. If you didn't see that one, Doug Martin gave his 2-year update on his crash on Valentine's Day. So check that out. It's only like,
I gotta watch that.
yeah, it was last week.
Okay.
Yeah, it was awesome. On Tuesday nights, we have ppgshane.com that does his Tuesday night hangouts on the first of the month, and then Eric will do the rest of the month at ppglear.com. On Wednesday, then Eric's wife Jade, paramotorgirl.com, hosts an all-girl paramotor podcast. You can find her at ppggirl.com. And then, of course, something happens on Thursdays. What's that, Miss Linda?
With my squeaky voice. Paraglidingtalk.com on Thursday nights with your host, the awesomest, Robert Michaels.
And Robert Michaels is who to you?
He's my number one son.
Aww.
Well, I have 2 number one sons, but yes, he's my number one paraglider son. That's
there you go. There you go. Because you can't call, your other son number 2 because he's like, what? Number 2? I don't want to
No,
be Deuce.
Ryan's my other angel. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can always find Linda over at her Facebook. She's always trolling Facebook, finding new pilots, and she's absolutely amazing. She's our PR girl. If you want to get up with us and be on our show, go to paramomusa.com. That forwards over to her Facebook page. Say hello and say that PPG Grandpa sent to me. We also got Will Fly from willflyppg.com. Makes amazing content. Tell us a little bit about your content before we head on out, bud.
Yeah, I just like to make videos about my paramotoring adventures with some corny humor. You can find me on YouTube under Will Fly or willflyppg.com.
.com. I love these .coms. Hey, Harley, thanks again, buddy. I really appreciate you. Thank you for hanging with us for 2.5 hours. How many hours? How many hours did we go on episode 24? Do you remember?
It wasn't very long.
That's back in the olden days when we just, didn't go more than an hour, right?
Right, I think so.
All right. You guys have a wonderful evening. Thank you again, Harley. We appreciate you. We appreciate everybody. Thank you. And we'll see you tomorrow. Is it PPG Lear or is it PPG Shane that we're going to tomorrow?
PPG Lear.
ppglear.com tomorrow and paramotorgirl.com on Wednesday and paraglidingtalk.com on Thursday. Y'all have a great evening. Love y'all. Air smooches and everything. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Harley. You guys are awesome.